Ecclesiastes chapter 10, and this one has that's why I listed it as a focus on foolishness, because that's the topic. I softened it a little bit because you just say fools if you want to, but I think sometimes we are wise and sometimes we're fools, and so maybe just foolishness, if we can get rid of that, we wouldn't be fools. And I was just looking at it, I was reminded of something that's been on the internet for a long time, and even Mythbusters did a thing on it. A fellow that wrote to his insurance, and he wrote, "I'm writing in response to your request for additional information," and block number 3, the accident reporting form. I put, "Poor planning as the cause of my accident. You said in your letter that I should explain more, and I trust that the following details are sufficient. I am a bricklayer by trade. On the day of the accident, I was working along on the roof of a new 6-story building. When I completed my work, I discovered that I had about 500 pounds of bricks left over. Rather than carry the bricks down by hand, I decided to lower them in a barrel by using a pulley, which fortunately was attached to the side of the building at the 6th floor. Securing the rope at the ground level, I went up to the roof, swung the barrel out, loaded the bricks into it, then I went back to the ground and untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure a slow descent of the 500-pound of bricks. You will note in block number 11 of the accident reporting form, I weigh 150 pounds. Due to my surprise at being jerked off the ground so suddenly, I lost my presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded at a rather rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explains the fractured skull and broken collarbone. Slowed only slightly, I continued my rapid ascent, not stopping until the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep into the pulley. Fortunately, by this time, I had regained my presence of mind, was able to hold tightly to the rope in spite of my pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground, and the bottom fell out of the barrel. Devoid of the weight of the bricks, the barrel now weighed approximately 50 pounds. I refer you to my weight in block number 11, 150. As you might imagine, I began a rapid descent down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the 2 fractured ankles and lacerations of my legs and lower body. The encounter with the barrel slowed me enough to lessen my injuries when I fell onto the pile of bricks, and fortunately only 3 vertebrae were cracked. I'm sorry to report, however, that as I lay there on the bricks in pain, unable to move, watching the barrel 6 stories above, I again lost my presence of mind and let go of the rope. You can guess what goes after that. Is that foolishness? What is foolishness? What's being a fool? Well, if you wait right now in our current culture, this whole discussion would be like, wait, that is not tolerant. I'm offended that you're using that term. That kind of thing, whatever. Look, let's see what the Bible says about it. And if I was to say that, well, if some people are fools or whatever, does anybody know this verse that I would be then smacked back with? Anybody? It's the very good. That has become the popular verse. Judge not, you got it in your sheet there, Matthew 7:1. Judge not that you be not judged. Now, I would say that most people that are using this verse in that way have never read the rest of the chapter. So before we get into foolishness, let's look at foolishness, and even if we're supposed to talk about foolishness. So if you go in the rest of that chapter, in just 2 verses down from that, he says, "Why beholdest thou the mote or a splinter that's in thy brother's eye, but considereth not the beam or plank, the log that is in thine own eye?" What Jesus is talking about is a self-righteous condemnation that they have, really hypocritical. And he's really aiming this at the Pharisees. And that's what he's talking about. Now, if you go down to verse 5, note the top of that. "Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then tell your brother he has nothing wrong with his eye." Is that what your Bible says? Has anybody got that in their Bible? That's because that's not what Jesus said. No, he then says, "And then thou shalt clearly cast out the mote or splinter out of thy brother's eye." Note, with the eye cleared, he is supposed to still notice there's something wrong with his brother. That's what he's supposed to do. Very next verse, Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine. Is this just having to do with, making sure you see the priority of your animals? No. He's making an illustration here. The holy would probably be holy meat that's meant to go to the temple. You're not to give that to dogs. Why? Because dogs don't know that it's holy. They just eat it or do whatever, probably in 2 bites. And pearls, obviously pigs, swine, don't know what to do with that. And you know what Jewish people thought of swine. So with this, he's once again talking about the idea, look, don't discuss a bunch of holy things beyond salvation, of course, but don't get into all these holy discussions, all this stuff with people that are antagonistic to God. Once again, what are you doing? I have to judge that they fit in those categories, do I not? And so we go down a few verses some more. Verse 15, beware of false prophets. That means I'm judging again. Which come to you in sheep's clothing. And verse 16 says, you shall know them, which means I'm judging again, right? You shall know them by their fruits. Here's the deal. There is a difference between judging and discernment. We are not supposed to judge, as in giving condemnation, sentence, all that to people. That is not ours, that is God's. But we are to be discerning people, which means we do say that certain things are right or wrong based on God's word, and even if people are doing things that are right or wrong. That is something that we are to do. That's called being discerning. So we can label whether things are foolish. We can do that type thing. Ephesians 4:14 says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by sleight of men, cunning craftiness, whereby they lie wait to deceive. But, and here's a key, and I know it's mentioned in this church a lot, but it's very important, but speaking the truth in love. Now, if we don't tell the truth, that's not love. But we can speak the truth in the wrong manner. So we are to speak the truth in love, they may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. And by the way, this has to do with the idea that those that are speaking it, speak it, but also those that are listening know it's for their own good, and they take it, they receive it, that it's been spoken to them in love. And verse 16, why? From whom the whole body fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto the edifying, the building up of itself in love. So we just speak the truth in love. That doesn't mean the truth is always going to be easy to take, all right? And that especially deals with the idea of looking at foolishness. So now we can look at this chapter, which has a lot to do with fools and foolish behavior. So what is a fool, or what's foolishness? Well, let me give you some things here. One of them is found, the major one is found in Psalm 14:1. And what I want to do is, there is the top level, I would say, of foolishness, and that's this one. But I want to make sure that we don't get into a thing where we say, well, that's not me, so I'm not doing things that are foolish. That would be a wrong conclusion. But the top one for sure is the foolishness the Bible talks about is someone that denies God's existence. The fool said in his heart, there is no God. Well, I don't care what the IQ is, God says that person is a fool if they do that. Another closely related is a person that has no fear of God. Proverbs talks about this a lot. Fear of God is a reverence, a respect, and with it comes a willingness to obey, despite what I may think about things. That's the fear of God. But below this, even for someone that may say there's a God, they may simply hate or just not want to follow godly wisdom and biblical knowledge. So this gets into people that can be sitting in church building, okay, and church buildings across America, to where they say, yes, I know there's a God and I love the Lord, but they don't really care to follow what he says. And that would be foolish to do so. Also, as Proverbs talks about, is those that don't listen to authority. That would include kids, listen to their parents, but also others. If someone is trying to tell me something and they're much wiser than me, they know more in this area, but I refuse to listen, that's foolish. And we should not just go headlong into things. We should accept wise counsel. These are all things you should do. If you don't do those, then Proverbs would say you are foolish. It also says in several verses, a foolish person is controlled by anger, pleasure, sloth, money, different things. And then finally, we get to this category that's called the simple or the naive, that isn't necessarily in these categories, but has very little discernment or wisdom. I would classify all these as a level of foolishness. Obviously, the top one is there, but I think that's important not to rule out certain kinds of things just because it's not the top one of the denial of God's existence. And that makes this hit home more to all of us as well to discern it in our culture. So here's two things as we look at this. Number one, don't act like a fool. So none of us should act like a fool. We shouldn't be foolish. But likewise, we should be able to identify when others are being foolish. I know that sounds like judging, but remember what we said, that's not judging. After all, if you're hiring people, you should use discernment on who you pick to hire, right? If you don't, that's foolish. And we will see that in this chapter, okay? That's foolishness. So you should be able to identify when you're looking at who your kids hang out with, you should be discerning. Well, I like to just be diverse and let anything. Well, no, you need to be discerning. Are they following the Lord? No, but I'm open-minded. Well, Proverbs says that's foolish. No, you should make sure that they're on the right path. And so these are things that actually Proverbs will talk about, avoiding certain people. It will say, hey, look, if you send like a foolish person as your messenger, you will regret it. Okay, so you discern these things. So these are two things we should look at. Well, number one is the danger of acting like a fool. Ecclesiastes 10:1 is something that actually results in a saying that's still used a lot today. Dead flies cause the ointment, or that might mean perfume, of the apothecary. That's a person that's a perfumer or makes it or sells it, to send forth a stinking savor. So here's a perfume that's supposed to smell good, but a fly gets in it, can't get out, dies, and it messes the whole thing up. Now it's stinky. It's the exact opposite. He says, then so doth a little, that's an important word, a little folly or foolishness, him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. A person that is known to be honorable, nonetheless becomes like this stinky perfume because of this one little thing. Derek Kidner says this, it takes far less to ruin something than to create it. This, incidentally, is part of the advantage enjoyed by evil and of its appeal to the vicious side of us. For to put it bluntly, as Solomon does, it's easier to make a stink than to create sweetness. But in this verse, it's the sudden lapse or foolish impulse that's the trouble. There are endless instances of prizes forfeited and good beginnings marred in a single reckless moment. That is a huge warning. In other words, one brief foolish action can destroy decades of wise ones. That it's a warning to us all to be on guard and be living, I'm going to say this over and over again, to be living led by the Holy Spirit every day, every day. Then he says this, Ecclesiastes 10:2, a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. So for you lefties in here, Solomon doesn't like you. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what he's saying right here. That has nothing to do with it. In the Bible, the right hand has some symbolism to it. We can see this. So number A, there we go. That's where I'm at. Letter A, he says, the right hand symbolizes honor. We see this in Ephesians 1:20, speaking of Jesus, which he, God, wrought in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and set him at his own right hand in the heavenly places. This is a place of honor, the right hand is. Also, the right hand symbolizes protection. In Psalm 139:10, David speaking, it says, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me, which means keep him secure and safe. In other words, wisdom does this. Wisdom brings honor. Now, I don't mean among the world necessarily. I know they twist things. But overall, wisdom brings honor, especially with the Lord. And wisdom brings protection. No, it's not going to guard you from every sickness out there. But what it does is it does guard you from the consequences that come from doing foolish things. And there are many of those. So a wise person automatically misses out on all those things because they don't do the things from which those things are consequences. And so that's called the right hand. All right, obviously the other, well, you can guess that it goes the other way. All right, so thus we get a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Thus, when you do foolish actions, you miss out on those things. You get dishonor. You make yourself very vulnerable to all these consequences that come from that. Verse 3, yea, also, when he that is a fool walketh by the way, which means when he's out in the streets, out in public, his wisdom faileth him, and he saith to everyone that he is a fool. Now, it's not that he's actually saying to everybody, hey, I'm a fool, but his actions speak and his words speak that to all those around him. Proverbs 18:2 says, a fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. That last part means he likes to express what he thinks. I will tell you this, I know sometimes, especially in the South, it's considered to be a virtue to be, I'm just a person that speaks my mind. Proverbs does not consider that a virtue, it considers that foolishness. Better if you hold it in. Yes, so if you're this person that speaks your mind, you want to correct that. So this is something the fool does. In fact, I have heard this next saying, and I'm telling you, it is only from preachers that I have heard this from, so don't blame me. The speed of light is faster than the speed of sound. That's why some people seem bright until they open their mouths, just so you know. So, but this is the kind of thing he's getting to. The second one is ruling like a fool. Now, I packaged these last two verses that he has at the end, or last few verses, because it goes in this category. So we'll just jump a little bit. If the spirit of a ruler rise up against thee, leave not thy place, for yielding pacifieth great offenses. This is talking about a ruler who's mad, and he's decided he's just going to take it out on the people that serve him. All right? He probably messed up himself, but out of pride, he's just going to take it out on all those that are around him. And before we get into the mode of saying, okay, this is kind of weird, we just read through this because it's talking about some king. We don't have a king. Now, these would apply to any place where you are in authority or you are under someone in authority. These will apply just as well in those circumstances. And so he has anger. Proverbs 25:28 says, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that's broken down and without walls. Although he's a ruler, he's not ruling well. He can't rule himself because he's in this state of mind. But notice, our response is really what Solomon's talking about in this verse. Our response when that happens is to do what? It's to kick back in the same way, isn't it? Throwing out stuff at me, well, I'll throw out stuff at you. And that's what we tend to want to do. That's what our flesh wants to do. But notice the second part of this says, leave not thy place, for yielding, this word yielding means as an understanding of calmness. For calmness pacifieth great offenses. Yeah. And one of the commentaries I was looking at, it said, calmness is a frequent motif of wisdom. Silence and reserve characterize the wise, while boisterousness and acting in haste identify the fool. And in our society, maybe unlike any other, it is such a thing. In fact, we like to we get little shorts and YouTube videos of people like spouting out something and going, oh, wow, that was a big one. And we almost get in this thing of that's really a good thing for us to do. God said it's not. In fact, the wise person holds his tongue and doesn't do that right away. Thinks about his words and what he's supposed to do. Proverbs 25:15 says, by long forbearing, or get that bearing part, is a prince persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone. There's power in the person that chooses their words wisely and has not that thing behind it, but more that softer tone and is able to be controlled when they say things. 2 Corinthians 10:3 says this, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. We're going to go a little deeper looking at this here. What's he saying here? Well, the flesh here in this verse is not like we hear of, hey, don't be in the flesh. Well, in this sense, if none of us are in the flesh, we're dead. Okay, because this is talking about your body. All right, just what you do in your regular body. For though we walk in the flesh, okay, and this thing we use, I got my hands and all this, we don't war that way. We don't war that way. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal or the flesh, like guns and knives and learning to fist fight well and all those type things, but mighty through God. These are spiritual, to the pulling down of strongholds. Ephesians says this, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. This is talking about after you need to put on the whole armor of God. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So when he's standing before that ruler that's accusing him of things that he's not responsible of, he needs to right away pull back, not speak, and I'm speaking to myself as well. We need to pull back, whether it's that boss perhaps or somebody else. We need to pull back and think, okay, this stuff right here they're saying is not true. But my battle's not with them. This is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle. We don't battle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of the darkness of this world. This is a Satan-directed battle, is what this is. Against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day and have done all to stand. We need to make sure when we leave the house and even before we leave the house that we have met with God and we've decided to die to self and be filled with the Spirit. We need to do that. Why? Because there's going to be satanic attack that comes in the form of people in flesh and blood that say things to us, even wrongly and unjustly, that are really being used as a tool of Satan. And if we see it that way, we'll respond differently. Those situations may have a material look, they are often solved with spiritual tools. So that's something we have to remember. We have to have this mindset there. Verse 5, he says, there is an evil which I've seen. And Dr. David Jeremiah says that this error that he's going to mention here in this verse, he says, as an error which proceeded from the ruler. He says this is something that's done, this understanding of this word, without considering the facts and consequences. He says, folly is set in great dignity, and the rich set in a low place. Now, this rich here means really the idea of those that are wise. Not that wisdom and riches go together necessarily. But in that day, if you were a wise man that was there to counsel kings and that type of things, usually if you've done that for a while, you had both wealth and prestige and that type thing. So that's what he's contrasting here, not really something necessarily with money. And he's saying with this ruler, this foolish ruler, he's got foolishness that's held in dignity, while those that are wise people are sitting in a low place. He says also, I've seen servants about on horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. All right, he's not talking about some kind of Marxist thing going on here, all right? This is not what's going on. What he's talking about here is that we've got a ruler that's putting people in the wrong positions. Why do people do this? Well, in Hollywood, they do it as payback for certain things that are favors. This can also be done for friends and relatives. The idea that he's getting across here is that we should be putting people that are good in the right jobs and not foolishly placing people in their jobs that shouldn't be there. That's what he's saying. A foolish ruler doesn't recognize that or just pushes that aside and does it anyway. Jumping toward the end here to some verses that go with this, verse 16, woe to thee, O land, when the king is a child. He doesn't mean a child, he means childish. So this could be a 50 or 60-year-old that's still acting childish as a king. And thy princes eat in the morning, or they feast, which means when they get up in the morning, they're not thinking about what needs to be done. They're like, oh man, it's time to eat some more. It's time to just live it up. That's the way they're ruling. Contrasting this, he says, blessed art thou, O land, when the king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season. They eat like, when you're supposed to eat. But they just do it for strength. They do it for sustenance and not for drunkenness or for partying and that type of things. They've got the right perspective. And there's been many rulers we can look throughout history, and some of the people I was, reading on this, they said, yeah, there have also been churches, not this one, but there have been churches where this mindset has happened as well, where God is blessed and the leadership has forgotten that and has kind of sat on that type thing. There have been empires and things where rulers have done the same thing, where they will, and that's what he's talking about here, where they will take taxes from the people and all that and feast on that, and they're nothing about just living the life. and not thinking about their kingdom. Verse 18 says, by much slothfulness, because they are lazy when they do that, the building decayeth. And through idleness of the hands, the house droppeth through. The kingdom falls apart when you have a foolish ruler that's really ruling like a child. That's a childish ruler. And of course, we can apply these to any place where you have authority. Any place where someone in authority becomes that way, that's a foolish thing. Woodrow Wilson wrote this. A friend of mine says that every man who takes office in Washington either grows or swells. When I give a man an office, I watch him carefully to see whether he's swelling or growing. I think God would have us to grow, but not to swell in our Christian life. I think that would be his preference. So, and I think many times we swell in the blessings he's given us and forget to keep growing in Christ. So that's the point there. Number 3 is working like a fool. Working like a fool, and maybe a picture to help you out there just a little bit. Make sure you right there, where somebody get hurt. A well-measured door. Nice. Pull. I'm not sure how you pull that door. These are all great jobs. And finally, congratulations on finishing thirst. So, anyway, these are jobs that were not done well. Not done well. These next verses, starting back with verse 8, this has some say, well, this is just talking about the dangers. I don't think so. He's been talking about foolishness the whole time. What he's talking about is what happens on the job with foolish people. It says, he that diggeth a pit shall or can fall into it. Whoso breaketh a hedge, well, a serpent jumps out and bites them. Okay. Whoso removeth stones shall be hurt. They fall on them. He that cleaveth wood shall be endangered thereby. In other words, foolish workers end up getting hurt and cause all kinds of calamity because they don't do things the right way. That's what foolish workers do. Now, verse 10 helps out. If the iron be blunt, this would be an axe, and he do not whet or sharpen the edge, then he must put to more strength. He's smashing the tree with a dull blade. Okay, that's what's going on. He's saying you need to sharpen that. Okay. Then he makes this, which is a little harder than the King James, but wisdom is profitable to the direct. What this means is wisdom is an advantage for success. In other words, work wisely. Don't work foolishly. Wisdom in this type of wisdom here, what would this be? Thinking the right thing about God, whatever. That's good, but what we're talking about here means humbly listening to those that give instruction. More and more, I think, I'm just maybe off base, but more and more it seems that more generations are thinking they already know it all when they get on the job. Listen to those people that are older and have been there longer. Listening to those that give instruction. Not doing things in haste. That will get you in trouble all the time. Going faster than your capacity. And just doing a good job. So what's the biblical thing on work? Well, number one, work was given by God. We find that in Genesis 2:15. That was before the fall. So work is not a curse. Work that has all the mess added to it's a curse. But work itself was there before man sinned. Also, we should work as unto the Lord. So a good Christian worker that's working wisely at his or her job works not as just to the boss, but really works as unto doing that to his ultimate boss, the Lord. That's the biblical way to do that. We're to work diligently and without procrastination, like the ant does. And we're supposed to make sure we don't procrastinate. It's a good thing that to get up here and preach or teach, you don't have to have all these conquered yet. So that one's the one I'm still working on. But we're not supposed to procrastinate, but do things when they're supposed to be done. Okay, and that's the way that work is supposed to be done. Also, we have just been seeing we're to work wisely with the principles that we discussed, which would be, once again, like Proverbs talks about, listening to those that give instruction, not doing things in haste just to get them done, doing a great job. Okay, work wisely. Finally, we've got speaking like a fool. Speaking like a fool. And here's a hinge verse right here. Surely, and this looks like another, this other goof on the job here. Surely the serpent will bite without enchantment. What this is this is a snake charmer. Okay, that's what this is, a snake charmer. Surely what happens is the serpent, he doesn't charm the serpents that do a good job, and so he gets bitten. He gets bitten by it. And then he says, he's hinging it now to this, a babbler is no better. What's the babbler have to take control of? His tongue. Yeah. So a person that doesn't control their tongue, the same thing happens to them like happens to the snake charmer that doesn't charm the snake soon enough. In verse 12, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious. They have grace. They are well thought out. But the lips of a fool will swallow him up. Going to Proverbs 10:32, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. That's a real mark of maturity. How many here have been in a place to where someone said something and everyone in the room, except maybe that person, knew that was not the thing to say in that place and at that time? You know what I'm talking about? That would not be what this verse is telling you. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. They know that. They know what to say. Some things you should never say, and then some things, well, you need to say them at the right timing and all of that. The mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness. It's just bad talk, wicked talk. I love Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. It's kind of a neat picture there. But anyway, but yeah, they're fitly spoken. Colossians 4:6 says, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. This is speaking wisely, using the tongue wisely. However, going back to verse 12, the second part, but the lips of a fool will swallow himself. That means he devours himself. His words devour him. And he doesn't even really know this. Verse 13, the beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness. Well, that's not a good start, but that's not where they end. The end of his talk is mischievous madness. He's just crazy in what he says. This is a fool. He doesn't start well and he ends even worse. Verse 14, a fool also is full of words. About this, Warren Wiersbe says, the fool is full of words without realizing that he's saying nothing. Yeah. So in other words, a person that talks a lot doesn't necessarily know a lot. So we should think about that. In fact, Proverbs 10:19 says, in the multitude of words there wanteth or lacketh not sin. But he that refraineth his lips is wise. Yeah. So he says, a fool is also full of words. A man cannot tell what shall be, and what shall be after him, who can tell him? And that reminds me of James chapter 4, verse 13, which says, go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such a city and continue there a year, buy and sell and get gain. Hey, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to go and we're going to do this, and it's going to be great, and I think it's going to turn out well. We're going to do all this. Have you prayed about it? No. Asked if it's God's will? No. We're just going to do all this stuff. Notice this is not talking about religious stuff here that we think is the religious category. This is business. See, God's stuff doesn't go in the God box and the rest of life goes in another. It's all God's box. So this is what James is getting at. In verse 14, he says, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. You're talking like you know what's going to happen and what you're going to do. You don't even know what is tomorrow. For what is your life? It's even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and vanisheth away. For ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. In other words, we should make sure we're in God's will before we start making all kinds of plans. The foolish man does not do this. And he even talks about what all he's going to do and what the future holds and all that. And he has no idea what he's talked about. And obviously he has not consulted God. In fact, verse 15 says this, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because he knoweth not how to go to the city. What does he mean? Wiersbe says this, the fool boasts about his future plans and wearies people with his talk, but he can't even find his way to the city. In Bible times, the roads to the cities were well marked so that any traveler could find his way. The fool is so busy talking about the future, he loses his way in the present. That's the fool. And then jumping to verse 20, which kind of goes with the rule, but also goes with this kind of idea. Yes, I'm almost finished. Thank you. The curse, curse not the king. No, not in thy thoughts. So the problem with the thoughts is that what I have in my head, if I don't control it, what does it do? It will come out. If I meditate on something long enough, whatever I'm thinking about in my head will come out. So what is happening is he's got a problem with the king. He's got a problem with whoever's in authority. And so he's not telling, he's just got his thoughts. I can't believe and he's thinking this. He says, no, don't do that. The reason it's going to come out. And he also says, curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. Okay, well, that's a secret place. He says, don't do this. And here's another saying that's come out of this. For a bird of the air shall carry the voice. This is where we get the whole thing. A little bird told me. For a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. You think you're speaking privately and all this, stop it, because it is going to get out, and he's going to find out. Ed Henson says this, practice the art of prayer and thereby ensure the providential guidance of the Lord in all your dealings with such a despot. Yes. So this person you have a problem with, he says, it's better, why don't you sit down, if you're going to talk about it to the Lord. Pray about it. Then follow what he says about the whole thing. So to conclude, to be wise, we should be wise to the dangers of not just foolishness, but a little foolishness. Just a little. We should be wise to using authority foolishly. We should be wise when we're serving under any authority, including if the authorities themselves are acting foolish. We should be wise in the way we work. And finally, we should be wise in the way that we use our tongue. So, let's focus on foolishness for tonight.